Protein requirement. How much do you really need? Let's cut through all the bullshit. How much protein are you going to have to eat to build muscle? Well, it might surprise you, and I guess maybe it might not. But it seems to me, after all these years, one of the things that I've learned is it's two different considerations, and it requires two different game plans as far as how much protein I'm going to consume. That is, first, it takes more protein, I've found, throughout my lifting, bodybuilding size, right? Size acquiring journey. It takes more protein to acquire new size, to go into a place where I've never been, to ascend, up that ladder, body weight going up, muscle mass going up, places I've never been before. That requires more protein than what my body requires to just maintain and cruise. Typically today, I think I always ate too much protein. And, the way that I diet, when I diet, I really eat too much protein. It serves a different purpose then, a whole different purpose than muscle consideration. I use it for a whole different reason then. So we're not even going to cover that right this minute. We're just talking about muscle. Building and keeping, maintaining muscle. How much protein. And today, I have a pretty good handle on how much protein I need to consume just to maintain. I can pretty much just cruise along and maintain my, musculature without any real muscle loss, consuming, I'd say, you're not going to believe this, but between 0.5 gram and 0.75 gram of protein for every pound of body weight. That's just like a maintenance level amount of protein. If I consume that much protein, I absolutely won't drop any muscle. So even like, this size, or it doesn't take a lot of consideration. I can pretty much pull that off without a whole lot of thought, planning, intention. Now to gain muscle, that's harder for me to really pinpoint because, as I've said, when I was gaining muscle, I probably consumed too much protein. But so a lot of it was probably being wasted. But I'll say this. When I was first getting, big, when I was first crossing that line from where you're, a muscular gym bro, like a lot of guys that work out, you're looking good and you're looking muscular. You definitely have more muscle than an average guy, but you're not holy shit big yet. Well, as I crossed that line, that separates those two, more or less, what I used to do was really keep close track of protein and calories, much more so than I have later on, because I find it's not as important. And it was new terrain for me on the way up, so I kind of paid a lot more attention to things because I really didn't have a firm understanding of what was going to matter most to me at the time and what was going to be most contributional in a positive way to continue to progress my physique, to continue to get bigger and gain more muscle. So my protein intake, I found that every time I bumped it up another 50 grams, I gained more size. Every time I plateaued, every single time, without fail, at least 4 different times that I took note of it, every time I plateaued, I would begin to consume an additional 50 grams of protein per day, atop wherever I'm already at. I add that 50 grams per day and maintain that every day, and I would gain more muscle. Enough muscle that you could see it. Now, it may take a little while, but I could plateau and get to where I'm really not growing, and I would add 50 grams of protein, gain more size. Plateau, no matter how long it took, add 50 grams of protein, gain more size. So 50 grams of protein was kind of my number. And I could grow a pretty long time on 50 grams of protein. I mean, I can remember taking in, 150 grams of protein a day, then jumping to 200 grams a day, then jumping to 250 grams a day, and seeing the reward in the form of additional size, additional muscle mass. I'm not going to say additional hypertrophy or hypertrophy, as I say, because I don't know how much of it was hypertrophy and how much of it is perhaps hyperplasia. Because as you know, and as we all know today, it's not only just hypertrophy. Everybody, mistakenly refers to it as hypertrophy, 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 hypertrophy. And it's not only about hypertrophy or hypertrophy, however you want to pronounce it. We actually acquire new and additional nuclei. We gain new nuclei. We grow new nuclei. So we actually create new muscle. We're not just enlarging muscle cells that already exist and muscle that already exists. We actually are acquiring new muscle that we never lose thereafter. So I don't know at what rate, how much percentage-wise after so much time of consistent training is hypertrophy, and how much of it is actually, new nuclei that you're going to grow and then they're going to hypertrophy. So I don't know. It's pretty complicated. We don't really need to understand it that well, do we really? At ground level, boots on the ground level, how much does it matter to us, right? Pretty much it's not going to change the way we approach it a whole hell of a lot. But I find that to gain muscle mass, new muscle mass, to go where you haven't already been, requires more protein than what it's going to require you to maintain when you get there. Okay? So that means that say I'm taking in 300 grams of protein, and I've gone higher than that, but say I'm taking in 300 grams of protein, I'm pretty huge. It might have taken me 300 grams of protein. I was steady growing, and now I seem to have topped out, and I'm still at 300 grams. Well, if I decide to take a break or whatever, and I'm still going to do maintenance workouts, I can cut that protein back considerably, and I won't lose size. Proof, exists today. Like I said, I can take in half a gram to 3/4 of a gram of protein per pound of body weight, and I won't lose any muscle. Now, I'm not going to grow new muscle with that. But if I turn the protein up and gain additional muscle, if I wanted to get bigger again, then it's still not new because I've already been there before, so it really doesn't apply. But if I were to gain some new muscle, once I acquired the muscle, once it was mine, once I had maintained it long enough, I don't know where that number is, or at length of time, I could back off of that protein intake, and I wouldn't lose that muscle just because I'm not taking in as much as it took for me to acquire it in the first place. So it is what it is. I'm not going to go. It just occurred to me that it might be worth mentioning. You don't really need as much protein as you think you do, but I think you need more protein to go someplace you haven't been than what you're going to have to ingest just to stay there. But I thought it was worth mentioning because it has been my experience, and I know it. I've known it for decade and a half or so, that's how it's worked with my body, and it's not going to, I think that we take in too much protein frequently, more than we need. And the thing is, once you're there, man, you can back up off that protein a little bit, and you really don't need the crazy amounts of protein to get huge. Pretty much, I don't think anybody should be taking in more than 300 grams. 300 grams is pretty much a number that you're going to be able to do a whole lot with. A whole lot of different people are going to be able to do a whole lot with 300 grams. So 300 grams, even in like a diet situation, I think 300 grams is a lot of protein. I think that's plenty. It's sufficient, more than sufficient. It'll get the job done. And in a diet situation, if you're using dietary thermogenesis, if that's what you're hoping to accomplish, 300 grams of protein is more than sufficient. I think that's a good number. I don't think you're really getting dangerous and hazardous yet. And plus, it's only going to be for a limited amount of time. Like if I diet pre-contest, the protein's going to be higher. If any dieting, protein's going to be higher because the body kind of folds in on itself at that point, and as it attempts to metabolize and figure out what to do with all this additional extra protein, you just kind of become an incinerator if you're eating the correct support foods along with that. And then you can come behind that with some exercise-induced thermogenesis, to give it like a 1-2 punch thing. It's not always the easiest thing in the world to do, but it does work. There's science behind it, and it works for me, and it's worked really, really well for lots of people. But there are some people out there that it doesn't work so well for. Hell, I've seen people that it's almost impossible to find what works. But if you don't give up and you keep trying, and that's the whole thing, don't give up, you're eventually going to find something that works no matter what you're trying to do. Whether it's something that I've advised you or something that I've bounced off you and said, hey, this is what worked for me. If that works for you, that's awesome. And if in the midst of all the considerations of information that you're ingesting, you find some combination or some variation or your own road, and that works best for you, that's awesome too. And by all means, come on out and share that with everybody so the rest of us can continue to try to accumulate really result-based, real-world experienced type of information. All right, that's it, man. I don't know if any of you can use that or not, but just something to think about maybe.